You know, pretty much every culture, every belief system has wrestled with this one massive question. It's not about where we came from, but where we're all going. What's the final chapter of our story, of the planet's story, of, well, everything? So, what's the shape of the end? Let's get into it. I mean, it's gotta be the biggest question there is, right? And we've been trying to answer it for thousands of years. Is it gonna be some sudden fiery spectacle, a final judgment for all of us? Or will everything just kinda slowly fade away? The stories we tell about the end are, without a doubt, some of the most powerful and defining tales in all of human history. Okay, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll get a handle on the fancy word for all this. Then, we'll look at two major ways of seeing the end, the big one-time-only finale and the great cosmic do-over. After that, we'll jump into what physics predicts before we finally ask ourselves, why are we so obsessed with the end anyway? All right, first up, let's start with the official term for all of this stuff. I know it sounds a little complex, but trust me, the idea behind it is something we all think about. So eschatology, that's the name of the game. It's basically humanity's attempt to write the final paragraph of the whole story, to make sense of our place in this huge cosmic narrative by trying to figure out how that story wraps up, not just for us as individuals, but for everyone, for everything. So the first big category of endings sees time as a straight line. Simple, right? There is a beginning, a middle, which is right now, that's us, and there is going to be a single, final, one-and-done conclusion, the grand finale of all of history. The Abrahamic religions are perfect examples of this. In Judaism, the end of days ushers in a messianic age of peace. Christianity talks about a great tribulation leading up to a last judgment. And in Islam, a series of major signs will come before the final day of judgment. Now, the details were all different, of course, but the basic structure, it's the same. History is moving in one direction towards one huge world-changing conclusion. And this really gives you a feel for the high drama of a linear ending. Islamic tradition lays out this whole series of major signs that are basically a cosmic countdown to the end. And we're not talking about vague little omens here. These are specific, world-shattering events. Everything from the arrival of a false messiah to something as impossible as the sun rising from the west, all signaling that the final judgment is coming. All right, now let's flip that idea completely on its head. What if time isn't a line, but a wheel? In this view, the universe just goes through these enormous cycles of creation, decay, destruction, and then rebirth. So the end is never really the end, it's just the pause before the next beginning. Hindu cosmology has this incredible concept that maps this out, the Yuga cycle. Think of it as 4 great ages, kind of like seasons for the universe. It starts with a golden age of truth, and then slowly winds down. Most scholars say we're in the Kali Yuga right now, the final age of conflict and decay. But it's not supposed to end in just nothing. The story says that Vishnu's final avatar, Kalki, will show up, end the darkness, and basically hit the reset button, starting the whole cycle over with a brand new golden age. And, we see a similar kind of pattern in some Buddhist traditions, too. The Buddha himself predicted that his teachings, the Dharma, wouldn't last forever, that after about 5,000 years, people would forget and the world would fall into chaos because the path to enlightenment was lost. But that's just setting the stage for the big comeback. And right out of that chaos comes the reset. The prophecy says a new Buddha named Maitreya will appear. He'll rediscover the timeless truths of the Dharma and guide the world back to enlightenment, getting that great wheel turning once again. It's an end that's all about renewal, not finality. Okay, so we've explored prophecy, we've explored theology, but what happens when we look at the end through the lens of physics? Science has its own set of predictions, and these aren't based on sacred texts, but on the fundamental laws that actually run the whole show. So in physics, there are basically 3 leading scenarios for how the universe might end, and it all comes down to this massive cosmic tug-of-war. One option is the Big Rip. That's if dark energy, the force pushing everything apart, is so strong that it eventually just rips everything to shreds, even atoms. The total opposite of that is the Big Crunch. That's if gravity wins, stops the expansion, and yanks everything back into one tiny point. And then there's the Big Freeze, which is kind of the current favorite. The universe just keeps expanding, the stars all burn out, and everything gets cold, dark, and empty. Our entire future hangs on the outcome of that fight. And speaking of cosmic forces, sometimes a real scientific discovery just captures our imagination and fuels all these new ideas about the end. A perfect example is something called the Great Attractor. As this person on Reddit asks, could this giant, mysterious gravitational anomaly be what finally does us all in?
Well, the reality is a little less dramatic, but it's still pretty incredible. The Great Attractor isn't some rogue universe eater. It's simply the gravitational center of our own home supercluster of galaxies, Laniakea. And yeah, its pull is enormous, but it's not winning the war against the universe's expansion. The best way to think about it is like a little eddy in a giant, fast-flowing river. The eddy pulls on us, for sure, but the river of expanding space is still carrying us away from it. So while it's an amazing piece of cosmic architecture, it's not our final destination.
So we have stories about divine judgment, stories about cosmic rebirth, and theories about a slow, silent freeze. They come from completely different places, ancient prophecies on one hand, modern physics on the other, but they all seem to scratch a similar, very human itch.
When you really get down to it, all these different visions of the end, whether they're religious or scientific, give us a framework. They put our short little lives onto a much bigger timeline that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And believing we know how the story concludes, well, that gives a sense of purpose to what we do right here and now. It gives us a sense of order in what can feel like a really big, really chaotic universe.
And that leaves us with one final thought. Whether you imagine a final judgment, a great cosmic reset, or just a silent universe cooling down, what does the ending you lean towards say about you? About our collective hopes for justice, maybe? Or our deep desire for a second chance? Or just our quiet acceptance of the laws of nature? Maybe the way we imagine the very end reveals everything about how we choose to live in the here and now.